Hi, we're here with Harry Campbell, a scientist with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And Harry, the Chesapeake Bay cleanup and cleaning up Pennsylvania's waters to meet federal water quality standards has been in the news a lot. And I was wondering if you'd start off first by giving us a little background about impaired waters in Pennsylvania and the Bay problem that we have.
Well, we have over 15,000 miles of impaired water bodies, rivers and streams, in the state of Pennsylvania. And what that means is that essentially they do not meet basic water quality standards. In some instances, there is very little or no life in some of these streams. Nutrients, nutrient pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as sediment pollution, are one of the leading causes of this impairment to Pennsylvania waters. Unfortunately, the Chesapeake Bay is also on that list, in large part due to the fact that the Susquehanna River that feeds into the Chesapeake Bay is inundated with these nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as sediments, that ultimately degrade the bay's overall quality and render it unable to sustain life.
Now, there's not just one source of this problem, am I right? There are a number of different sources. Can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Sure. There are general classification as point sources and non-point sources. Point sources are those that come from wastewater treatment plants as well as industrial facilities. These are discharges from sewage treatment plants and other things. They are also non-point sources, which come from runoff from, say, for instance, an agricultural field or a parking lot or rooftops in our newer subdivisions, as well as in our commercial districts as well.
I think one of the things that's gotten in the news lately is that people are starting now to make plans for how to upgrade their sewage treatment plants. And Pennsylvania itself has made commitments to do things that will clean up our waters. Could you outline that?
Sure. Well, back in 2005, we started to make commitments to actually improve the overall health of our water quality in the state of Pennsylvania and the Chesapeake Bay back in the middle of the 1980s. But the latest iteration was known as the Chesapeake Bay 2000 Agreement, and that was an agreement amongst all the major Bay states to actually have specific reductions in the amount of pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as sediment pollution, that is entering the Chesapeake Bay from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, all the major Bay states. This was a response due to a lawsuit against EPA, which found that the Environmental Protection Agency had to develop what is known as a total maximum daily load to assure that the bay would be restored by at least 2010. The tributary strategies, which were what we call the tributary strategies, were released in 2005 in Pennsylvania. That compliance plan included how we are going to actually achieve the necessary reductions in the amount of pollution we send to the Chesapeake Bay through non-point source and point source actions. One of those actions was including, for the first time ever, actual load limits in the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus wastewater treatment plants could discharge into Pennsylvania waters.
I think the other element too is that agriculture contributes to the problem, as you mentioned, as a non-point source, as you said. They've also been subject to different requirements. They've made significant investments through growing greener, and last year the REAP tax credit helped them clean up farms. Can you tell me a little bit about the agricultural side?
Sure. Agriculture is the majority of the amount of pollution that is assigned to that particular source that's coming from Pennsylvania waters and into the Chesapeake Bay. And they are a leading source of impairment in our Pennsylvania rivers and streams as well. So there's a lot of work to be done on the agricultural side of the equation. But the simple fact of the matter is that if we had just addressed the agricultural sector, which provides around 50% of the nitrogen and a little over 50% of the phosphorus that's entering into the Chesapeake Bay from Pennsylvania, we would simply not get to where we need to be in terms of the federal mandate to clean up the Chesapeake Bay. We have to address all sources within the watershed, including point sources and non-point sources like agriculture and urban stormwater runoff, to get to where we need to be in terms of the overall reductions. Pennsylvania agriculture over the last 20 years has been the focus of all of our tributary strategies up until the most recent one. We have tried to make our reductions through that sector almost holistically. And you're absolutely right in terms of growing greener, as well as the recent REAP, Resource Enhancement and Protection Act of Pennsylvania activities of this year. Has helped Pennsylvania achieve the reductions that we have achieved thus far. Quite frankly, however, we have a lot more to go. We have to do a lot more in a lot quicker time frame. We've made a lot of great progress, but we need to do more, and we need to do it faster.
Some of the other Bay states have chosen to help their wastewater plants with these upgrades and reduce the impact on individual sewer service ratepayers. Can you give us sort of an overview of that?
Sure. Both Maryland and Virginia have made significant commitments to actually paying for the upgrades associated with the wastewater treatment plants. In Maryland, they have what is known as the flush fee. And what that essentially is a $2.50 per month fee on each household, whether you're on septic or whether you are sewered, that goes into a general fund that helps pay for these upgrades in the state of Maryland, to the tune of almost, last year, over $90 million just last year. All told, by 2010, they'll commit almost $1 billion to this effort. It's important to note, however, that Maryland is requiring a lot more of their wastewater treatment plants. They are going to almost the limit of technology. Pennsylvania is not requiring our wastewater treatment plants to go to the limit of technology. In Virginia, they have committed. Just last year, they put forward around $280 million in the fiscal year 2006 and 7 towards the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. And they will be contributing to around $700 million additionally to that effort by 2010. So these other Bay states have committed a vast amount of resources to this effort, upgrading wastewater treatment plants. And we feel that Pennsylvania needs to at least step up to the plate in that regard and provide at least an aggregate that is representative of what our needs are within the state of Pennsylvania, particularly towards meeting this requirement by the deadlines that are established in 2010.
And in terms of what Pennsylvania has done in terms of funding, you mentioned the REAP tax credit, $10 million. There's been investment, a little bit of investment on the wastewater side. Mm-hmm. The, I guess, question is, where are we and sort of where should we be going in terms of financial support?
Well, one of the latest estimates is that over the several years, past 5 or so years, we've committed around $28 million towards wastewater treatment plant upgrades in the state of Pennsylvania, in the Bay watershed. When you consider what Maryland and Virginia have put forward, just last year, Maryland over $90 million, and in fiscal year 2006-7, Virginia has put up over $280 million. Quite frankly, that when you look at those three states, what those two other states have done, Pennsylvania falls far short in terms of the amount of public commitment that has been put forward by their governments to help ratepayers deal with this significant federal mandate. And quite frankly, it is a federal mandate. We don't have a choice but to upgrade or at least put into place wastewater treatment permits that limit the amount of phosphorus and nitrogen pollution coming into our waters. It's important to note Pennsylvania, up until now, has had no limits for this except under certain special circumstances, and that only for phosphorus. But you could discharge as much nitrogen as you wished without any sort of regulation in the state of Pennsylvania in the Bay watershed until just recently.
On the agriculture side, we're behind in funding. In spite of everything that we've done, we're behind in funding agricultural cleanup as well. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and to the tune of around $165 million a year. We've done great progress. We've done great work, as I mentioned earlier, with the nation's leading CREP program, the innovative and nation's first Resource Enhancement and Protection program, as well as Growing Greener, a national model for environmental improvement and watershed restoration in the nation. But we need to do much more, and we need to do it on a much tighter time frame.
Chesapeake Bay Foundation has been pretty unique because you work with the ag community, you work with wastewater plants, you work with a lot of different people. Tell me a little bit about how the foundation gets involved in these kinds of initiatives and what you yourselves have been doing.
Well, first and foremost, we are the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, but we're Pennsylvanians first and foremost. And so everything that we do in the eye of improving our local water quality. That means improving the fishability of our streams. Many of us are trout fishermen, so we want to see our fisheries restored to their and maintained in terms of their ability to reproduce native brook trout, for instance. So this is where it really hits home for us. We are mostly concerned about quite frankly, the Chesapeake Bay is essentially the Susquehanna River. Susquehanna River provides over 80%, or excuse me, over 50% of the fresh water that we see in the entire Chesapeake Bay. So we feel that if we restore and protect our streams, the Bay will respond in kind. We get involved on multiple levels with a lot of different issues, whether it be regarding point sources and the development of the allocation strategy for establishing how we are moving forward in this plan, a plan that was not only endorsed but led by the Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Association. We work individually with farmers with our buffers restoration program. We have 6 field staff who actually work individually with farmers to actually establish forested buffers on their landscape so that they can individually improve water quality as well as habitat over time. And we also work on the legislative level in trying to collaborate with multiple entities, wastewater treatment plants, as well as farmers and businesses and other concerned citizens on the Resource and Enhancement Protection Act, which last year was passed at $10 million. And we hope to see that increase to $50 million this year. So we work on multiple levels. We even work with municipalities in updating their stormwater and land use codes so that they reduce the amount of impervious surface that they generate, while at the same time manage and protect the resources within the Chesapeake Bay, but most importantly in their own backyard. Improving the quality of life of every Pennsylvanian is essentially the mission of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Pennsylvania office in particular.
Harry, thanks very much for all the background.
Yep, most welcome.